Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's meeting. Madam Clerk, would you please read the adequate notice of compliance statement?
Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by the City Clerk's Office in preparation of the Council Annual Meeting Notice dated January 8th, 2018, which was properly distributed and posted per statutory requirements. Please be advised that the fire exits are to my right, your left, and at the back of the room. The city has a listening system to assist the hearing impaired. If anyone needs hearing assistance, please obtain the system at the dais and return it thereafter.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bowman.
Here.
Ms. Fox.
Here.
Mr. Gould. Ms. Little.
Here.
Mr. McTiernan.
Here.
Ms. Ogden.
Here.
President Naidoo.
Here. Okay. I would like to call upon Pam Hayes to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pam.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you please read the notices regarding closed session and hearings and comments?
A closed session meeting as authorized by state statute was announced and held prior to the start of this meeting, and the known items for discussion were listed on the published closed session agenda. Please be advised that council meetings are broadcast live on Comcast Channel 36, and I was just advised that we are on Channel 35 instead this evening, and Verizon Channel 30, and rebroadcast on Thursdays and Saturdays on Hometown TV on Comcast 36 and Verizon 33. When invited to speak, please come to the lectern, clearly state your name and address, spell your last name, and speak into the podium microphone so that your comments can be understood by all and properly recorded. Whenever an audience or council member reads from a prepared statement, please give or email a copy to the City Clerk's office at rlicatis@cityofsummit.org. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers are asked to limit their comments to approximately 3 minutes or so in length. Unless you're using an electronic device to follow the meeting agenda or need it for professional emergency contact purposes, please turn it off. Thank you.
Thank you. Now to minutes for approval. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of regular and closed session of September 17, 2018? Motion.
Second.
All those, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. On to reports. The mayor is out of town today, so we're going to skip her report and on to the city administrator's report. Michael.
Thank you, Council President, and good evening, everyone. Important information from the clerk's office. Election day is Tuesday, November 6th. The deadline to register to vote is Tuesday, October 16th. To accommodate last-minute registrants, the clerk's office will or has scheduled voter registration hours on October 16th from 8:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. In accordance with recently enacted amendments to election law, the mail-in ballot application now provides voters with an option to receive a mail-in ballot for all future elections permanently, whereas prior to the amended law, a voter could only request to permanently receive a mail-in ballot for general elections. This change is indicated in the upper left-hand corner of the attached mail-in ballot application. Please note, a voter may apply for a mail-in ballot by mail up to 7 days prior to the election. He or she also may apply in person to the county clerk's office until 3 p.m. the day before the election. The Summit Free Market fall events are scheduled Saturdays, October 6th and 13th from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Municipal Transfer Station. Bring your yard sale quality items to share and take whatever you want or need. It's all free. Adult and student volunteers are needed. Please email pressoffice@cityofsummit.org if you would like to volunteer. Milling work will begin tomorrow, Wednesday, October 3rd, and continue Thursday, October 4th on Tanglewood Drive, from Rotary Drive to Ashland Road, weather permitting. Access to driveways may be intermittent during the milling process. Emergency vehicles will be provided access at all times. Fire Prevention Week is October 7th through October 13th. This year's theme is Look, Listen, Learn, Be Aware, Fire Can Happen Anywhere. It identifies essential ways to reduce the risk of fire and be prepared in the event of one. Please visit cityofsummit.org/fire for more information on Fire Prevention Week and other Summit Fire Department events, including Bells Across America. a moment of a remembrance, where bells will ring from coast to coast as part of the memorial ceremony. It will be held outside the Summit Firehouse at 10 a.m. on Sunday, October 17th, to honor 103 firefighters who died in the line of duty in 2017. For 37 consecutive years, the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation Memorial Weekend has been held in Emmitsburg, Maryland, to honor firefighters who have given their lives protecting the communities they serve. A team of 5 Summit firefighters, including Chief Eric Evers, Battalion Chief Paul Mbibo, Lieutenant Brian Harnoy, and 2 retired members, Deputy Chief Rick DeGroot and Battalion Chief Joe Wurzbacher, will travel to Emmitsburg before the Sunday ceremony to help organize and plan the event. Parking. All residents are required to renew parking and municipal disposal area permits annually by October 31st. Please go to cityofsummit.org/parking to renew permits online or for more information. The final concert of the summer series, Brian Kirk and the Jerks, is set for Monday, October 8th. This is a rescheduled event at 6 p.m. on the Summit Village Green. Join the Department of Community Programs for some food, music, and fun, sponsored by Investors Bank. The Summit Board of Health is reminding residents of the importance of the flu vaccination for anyone 6 months of age and older. Vaccination is particularly important for people who are at high risk of serious complications from the flu. And finally, installation of positive train control, PTC equipment, on New Jersey Transit's rail fleet to meet federal year-end milestones is requiring New Jersey Transit to temporarily discontinue or modify service on the Morris and Essex lines in and out of Hoboken from October 14th through the end of 2018. Information on these changes is available on the city website, or please sign up for alerts from New Jersey Transit at njtransit.com. And that is all this evening. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Michael. For my Council President's report, I'd just like to report on the fact that I was the stand-in, as they say in the theater business, for the mayor this past weekend for the celebration of the Summit Playhouse in its 100th year. There was a dinner at the Summit Grand Hotel, and what I did not know is that the location of the Summit Playhouse used to be where the Summit Library was, and that the Summit Playhouse actually has been one of the longest continuously operating playhouses in this country because it operated even during World War II. It's a fascinating history, it's a fascinating story about this playhouse and its role in Summit, and I would encourage folks to go and see their productions and see what interesting stuff we have in town here. So that's my one little short note. And tonight we have 2 presentations, the first of which is continuing in our series of having presentations from different boards come to council and share their thoughts about what they're up to and what they think they would like to see in the future. We're going to have the Community Programs Advisory Board, which when I think 2 years ago when I first came onto council, I was the liaison to that board, and I will say it was one of my most enjoyable experiences to be with the folks in that board. It's a great board. And with that, I'd like to introduce Elaine Anderson, the chair of the board. Elaine.
Hi. Do I need to give my name and address and things?
I think we're good.
So I'm Elaine Anderson. I'm the presiding officer for the Summit Board, Department of Community Programs Board. I've been on the board for about 1.5 years. I've lived in Summit for 13 years. I'm in the Brayton district. I have a son in the middle school. And it's my pleasure to present. And we're appreciative of the opportunity to share with you what we've been working on. The agenda of what we'll go through is 1, an overview of who we are. 2nd, where we put our time and energy. And then 3rd, we'll go a little deeper into the field situation, which is where we have been putting a lot of our discussion time and energy of late. So this is who we are. So first, David was a very good advisor to our board, but now we are very fortunate to have Mary with us, and she is a really highly engaged partner and has been a strong contributor, and we're proud to have her with us. You've got Matt Cohen, who is in the Franklin district, and he is a big lover of kids' sports and the lessons it gives. Billy Gouveia, who will tell you that the best place in the world on a hot night is the Summit Family Aquatic Center. Pam, who led us in the Pledge of Allegiance, is going to be leaving us, and we are very much at a loss because she has been a Summit resident for 25 years, on the board for quite a while, and really steadfast in her approach of everything. Scott Lenz was the presiding officer prior to me. He's got vast experience and really lends a lot of time to Summit, not just on our board, but also on the, he's been on the Summit Junior Baseball and Softball Board. John Petrides and Andy Smith are both Washington school parents, and they are feverish coaches in this town, and occasionally their teams will meet, which I would stay out of that one if I could. Carol Wegman is a senior on our board, and she really does a nice job representing the senior views. She is a yoga devotee, and you might have seen her in the Memorial Day Parade, where she proudly walked with Shark Diddy. And then Shalene Way is last on our board. She is, has a high school daughter and loves being on the sideline of activities, and is always known for bringing loads of snacks. So I think for me, though, my takeaway here and what I hope you get is that it is a really diverse, committed team. They are all here. And with that, we really work hard to try to represent the views of Summit, and not just our own vested interests, but what we think is best for the neighborhood and the council. Now, we would be remiss if we didn't share our partners at DCP, which, as I've worked on this board, I've really come to realize what an asset they are to the community. And in particular, I would call out Judith, Mark, and Jamie, who really go above and beyond to meet the needs of what the community needs, and then clearly what the board needs as well. So the DCP has a mission, vision, and value statement. So the mission is to provide recreational and other related programs and services which meet the community's needs, with a special focus and consideration on seniors and youth. And the vision is to serve as the community's prime source for recreation, youth, and seniors, providing excellent programs, facilities, services, and information. And then they have a host of values behind it of how they operate and what they like to bring out. And I would say that our role in the board is really to partner with the DCP staff to make sure that we're delivering on these things for the community. So when I think about what we tend to do and where we focus our work, I'd put it in a couple of buckets. And the first would be around expanding the thinking. The DCP staff already does a tremendous job of bringing new, invigorating activities to our community. And we really try to help on how can we better them, what else could we do, what are the other opportunities out there. We also try to aid in preparation, so as they're working on something, you know, the community facilities and the rec center renovation is a big one. How can we help with any contingency planning? What are other thoughts of what could go wrong? How are we prepared for that? So how can we complement their thinking? And then I would say the third thing that we've done some effort on this year has really been about succession planning. You know, Judith has been threatening with retirement for a long time, but it appears to really be coming, and it is, you know, no longer a threat, but it is at the end. So how do we make sure that there's a clean succession plan and the community continues to get the great services that they've gotten out of DCP without her at the helm? So in general, I'd say community facilities, the Family Aquatic Center, and the golf course, youth sports, senior programming, field space, and succession planning are where we tend to spend our energy and time. So most recently, we've really taken a deep dive into the field situation. And if you have children who live in Summit or who have played sports in Summit, you are aware, I'm sure, at some point of an issue with a field, and either a shortage of space, a field not being available, and practice being held on a parking lot, or having to go to another town because we didn't have something. And this has really been a long-term problem. In 2006, there was a fairly comprehensive recreation master plan done, and it was identified then, and I think it's been exacerbated. If you think about expanded seasons, we now have baseball in fall and summer, not just in spring. Soccer, which used to really be a fall sport, now is in spring. We've also seen increased travel teams, which is great. We want to be encouraging all children to be out there and to be playing there, but you have more travel teams, so more time requiring practices plus games. The other increase has been around adult participation. And as we've gone through this work, we've tried to work with the various sports presidents and field advisory, and talking with Alex Cranmore, who runs an adult league, and he also does some pickup games. He's credited social media for some of the increased participation, because he'll do a pickup game and he'll have 24 spots for 2 teams, and he'll have 45 people show up for it because of the, mass appeal of social media. That's okay. So we've been working with all of the sports presidents and field representatives, and I don't know if anyone's walked in, but we definitely here have soccer, lacrosse, baseball, and softball, as well as Dan Healy, who's the athletic director here today, who have been very active with us in this. And when we started it, we said, we want to make sure if we come up with a potential solution that it really meets the needs of what these groups are looking for. So soccer, feels that they need an additional field with an emphasis on an intermediate or small size field, but if you had a field, they could line it that way. Baseball is looking for an additional T-ball field. They're also looking to have more flexibility in their fields. So if you made the dirt bigger, you can then accommodating more ages and more grades because you can move the bases appropriately. I'm getting nods. That one took me a little time to understand. So, okay. Lacrosse, which is heavy in the spring and starts when we still have a lot of snow on the ground, would really need a field with turf and lights, so they have a longer playing time. And then football is the same, of also looking for a field with lights. So we've done quite a bit of brainstorming. We started as the DCP advisory board with the DCP team, and then we expanded it to bring in the sports presidents. We had multiple meetings with them and narrowed them down. And I won't go through all of these ideas, but just a couple to share with you the extremes of what we looked at. So one of the ideas we've talked about is having the lights on 7 days a week at Upper High School. Right now, there's a turf field there. The lights go off at 9 o'clock, and they're only on Monday to Friday night. If you put those lights on Saturday and Sunday night, it would be a fairly easy implementation. It would be fairly low impact to the neighbors. I don't want to say no impact, but it's not going to give you a huge incremental impact, but it would give us a couple more hours where we could have a soccer game in the fall or start something in the spring. We talked about adding an additional T-ball field at Franklin. So for those of you who know Franklin, right now there's one baseball field and a big soccer field. If you went to the far corner away from the road and you put another T-ball field in there, you probably couldn't play 2 third or fourth grade games where kids are hitting the ball a little harder, but you could play 2 T-ball games consecutively, right? So it would give you an entirely incremental field, which would give us more space. Mixed impact to the neighbors. They're already having, it's a school, you're already having a lot of weekend activity there. You might see a little bit more of it, but a little bit of space. Then we looked at really big, more outlandish ideas, but saying we're going to put everything out there. What if we put a field on the rooftop of the parking garage? So taking a cue from what they do in New York City, right? So it could be a way to give us an incremental field, more space, those things. We also talked about uncharted territories, like could you create a field or a complex at Bryant Park. So we looked at all of these ideas, weighed them on a number of different scales, and then really paid attention to possibility versus probability, right? So could be a possibility that you could put a field on Bryant Park. I think the probability of that happening is very low. So as a collective group, our recommendations are kind of twofold. The first is that a Tatlock redevelopment plan is going to be coming forward and submitted in the, I think what it's called. Thank you. In the capital the fall capital budget recommendation. And in that, we are going to be putting a recommendation to add lights to Investors Field and Upper Tatlock. We're also going to be recommending that we use those lights on Upper High School 7 days a week. In that plan, there's also an acknowledgement for the update for the Anderson Fieldhouse. And I will say this was originally not in the scope of what we were trying to do, but in meeting with the sports president, there was so much passion about that being an underused space for us and an opportunity to do more with that and take advantage of it. But it would require some cleanup. For additional impact, we're also going to be recommending that we upgrade the Franklin Field and the baseball backstop there. So it's not about adding another T-ball field, but rather really the safety of that facility. There was some issues with baseball there last year, and the field is one of the weaker ones of the fields we play in, so there was a real concern for some safety. Regarding finding a new T-ball field, our recommendation is that we add it into what is fondly called the cow pasture, so that's the space behind Investors Field, so create a T-ball field there, and then also explore water service at Lincoln, which would let you take better care of that field, the baseball field there, and then get a little bit more use out of it. The other 2 points are to facilitate the assessment to move the K-9 to create space at Glenside. So right now, there's the Union County space just behind it. We don't believe we could develop fields on it, but potentially you could put K9 there, and that would give you more room to do something more permanent in Glenside. And then last, and I know you all are acutely aware and involved with this, is the Transfer Station Development Task Force, so we will continue to support and engage with that. So the next steps there are to include those ideas in the fall capital budget recommendation, obviously secure community feedback behind these, and taking a nod from the DCP, share the fun.
Thank you, Elaine. Thanks very much, and thank you for all the folks from your board for coming tonight. This is a great turnout. It shows the commitment of these folks coming out, and also the folks who are involved with the different sports teams. We'll do this, if folks here have some questions or comments or suggestions, do that first, and then if there are folks in the audience who have questions or comments, we'll do that, okay? Anyone want to start? Mike.
Elaine, thank you so much. That was a great presentation, and I know you guys work really hard, and I have a lot of kids who play sports, and I know how it doesn't work without really passionate people who run all the organizations, both at the city level as well as all the private clubs, so thanks for everything that you're doing. Just a couple of questions. I'm just interested when you talk about the Anderson Fieldhouse, because that's come up in some of our capital budget discussions. Could you just be a little more specific around what kind of usage you would envision for that, outside of sort of the current locker room usage that it gets now?
So we did not take a deep dive into exactly what we would recommend. In our conversation, there was thoughts around, could you watch films? Could you do some training videos, but better use of the space? You know, should we have a second floor on that building? So it went to a kind of a broad, we were in a brainstorming anything, but there was definitely a lot of passion for both cleaning up that locker room and then also putting some kind of meeting room in there, I think, so you could work with the teams.
Okay, and then the last question would be, have the board done any initial sort of community outreach around some of these proposals, like in particular the ones I know that would certainly have some interest from some different neighborhoods would be the lights on some of the fields?
So we have not done community outreach on them. We've worked with the sports presidents, who are certainly community residents, and their field representatives who believe that this could make a difference for our community, but we haven't gone to the neighbors. The one thing for the lights for me, because I know that there's been a long history here about turfing some fields and putting lights on those, I do think the light technology has evolved from where it was 10 years ago when there was the last discussion about lighting some of the fields. And the tennis courts at Tatlock are a good example of lights which don't really have any spillover, are direct down, and we haven't had any complaints from the neighbors about those lights since they've gone in.
Okay, great, thank you.
So.
Mary.
Just a compliment. I love serving on this board, and it's been a really fun, I agree with you, it's a really wonderful board. But I also want to compliment you, Elaine, because all the meetings that I've attended and been a part of, what's so impressive is everyone's contribution, everyone's ability to think what will have the least amount of impact, what can we try to squeeze into, you know, our playing fields. How can we, without major construction, without major change, without, you know, trying to do with what we do have. And you know, I do think creative ideas going forward are the way to go, and lighting will be something to really consider in light of the fact that it has changed so much over the past 10 years or 11 years when they were put in. But just thank you all for all your dedication to this board, because it's, I think, a very important one, and our kids all benefit when, you know, invested parents come and get involved and have a say. So thank you.
Thank you.
Marjorie.
I'll second what Mary had to say. Thank you, Elaine, and the entire board. I just had a couple of questions. One was about the Tatlock complex. I saw that there was some discussion about the condition of the track. Is that something that's being discussed in the context of the work at Tatlock?
Yeah, so within the redevelopment plan, there is a recommendation that we also improve the track at Tatlock.
And by improve, you mean replace, or not necessarily?
I have to look to
I
Mark.
don't mean to put you on the spot, I'm sorry.
To replace.
You're not there yet?
To replace, yes, to replace.
Replace, okay. All right, and then the other question was, you mentioned the K9 area down at Glenside. I had heard ideas about actually placing another field back there. Is there not space if the K9 unit is successfully moved someplace else?
Oh, if the K9 unit was successfully moved, there could be space at Glenside to put
Okay.
something else there. The K9 community apparently wants to be very close to the highway, so they can, because they serve all of Union County. So I don't think uprooting them and moving them far would be an option that would be considered. But because there is a space that now is Union County, the thought is they could go right there, and that would open something up at Glenside.
Oh, so they would move to a different Union County facility, or they'd still be on that same property? I'm a little unclear.
Marjorie, or through you, Council President, if I may. So last year or the year before, Mayor Radis and I actually engaged with the Union County Sheriff around that possibility of moving it, and the sheriff was on board to do it. But to what you just said, there's a lot of constraints on where the K-9 unit has to be located, and it's not easy. He went through and did a pretty substantial vetting process to find a space, and was unsuccessful at the time, and now he's no longer the sheriff now. But I think certainly at the time they were very willing to engage around that process, and maybe that is something certainly from our end we can re-engage with the sheriff again, the new sheriff, to see if that works, because that's a great spot, and to your point, it's got running water, it's got a gas line, there's a lot of stuff you could do with that if you could find a place to move what's an important part of the safety of our county, which is the K-9 unit. So,
Anyone else here? Okay. I'll open it up for the public. Is anybody from the public have any comments, suggestion, ideas, thoughts, anything? Good. All right. Well, again, thank you, Elaine, for coming in. But before we go on to the next presentation, I would like to do a recognition of service. Pamela Hayes is, as you heard, no longer going to be serving on the board, but she has served on the board from, I guess, March 2010 through now October 2018, 8 years serving the community. And so with that, Pam, would you come up and I'll give you a little gift on behalf of the community.
Judith cannot be here tonight, but on her behalf and everybody in our department, the staff, we thank you for your service. We appreciate everything you've done. We're going to miss you.
Thank you so much. I'm only leaving because I sold my house.
Okay, so the next presentation is dealing with parking, and Rita McNanny, who's our parking services manager, is here to give us a presentation. And this is really looking at, I guess, parking into the future. I'll give you guys a minute. If anybody wants to leave right now, feel free to do so. But if you want to stay for parking, you're free to do so also.
My name is Rita McNanny. I'm the Parking Services Manager for the City of Summit. Good evening, members of Common Council. This evening's presentation is about two major developments on the forefront of the parking and transportation industry that was presented at the International Parking Institute's annual conference that I attended this year. The first is autonomous vehicles, and the second is transforming mobility. Sorry, I think they showed this one. So again, a lot of discussions on autonomous vehicles. There's predictions that will be in the Jetson life very soon. So, what are autonomous vehicles? There are actually 5 different levels. So if you give me a moment, I'd like to briefly explain what the 5 different levels are. The first 3 levels, the driver must be alert at all times. Level 1 has automated system features, such as cruise control, backup camera, lane detection systems, which are most new vehicles today. Level 2 has Level 1 features, plus automated accelerating, braking, and steering. The driver must remain alert if the automated system fails. Level 3 includes Level 1 and Level 2. However, the automated system recognizes its performance limitation, and the driver must remain in control of the vehicle within a sufficient time frame. Level 4 is where the automated system is in control, except in certain events such as hazardous weather conditions, severe weather, rain, snow, ice. Level 5 is where there is no driver intervention required. Just simply set the destination and start the system, and it's fully autonomous. Developers of autonomous vehicles predict that by the year 2070, 95% of traffic will be autonomous vehicles. But there are many barriers with autonomous vehicles. There are grave safety concerns. There have been many accidents with testing AV vehicles, including one pedestrian fatality. The technology is quite expensive. Plus, it has connectivity and reliability issues. There are many questions surrounding government regulations. There are legal issues. The costs are not affordable for most. The Level 3 and 5 autonomous vehicles range from $150,000 to $250,000 per vehicle. There's a lack of consumer trust currently as well. This chart depicts why autonomous vehicles fail. Almost 35% is with perception discrepancies, such as a vehicle sensing overhanging branches as an obstacle. 34% includes inherent software and hardware issues. The balance is due to unwanted maneuvers by autonomous vehicles, weather conditions, emergency vehicles, pedestrian habits, and construction zones. As mentioned, there's barriers such as snow as ice, heavy fog, and many road detours, which make autonomous vehicles difficult for adaptation here on the East Coast. Let's take a look at the government and legal barriers. Who is at fault for an AV accident? Who will own the insurance? Will AVs be programmed to always follow the law? How will AVs be programmed to respond in emergency? What will the role of federal, state, and local governments be? Then consumers weighed in. Reuters conducted a poll in January of 2018. Out of the close to 2,600 participants, 2/3 are uncomfortable with the idea of riding in a self-driving car. The respondents included both males and females and different age brackets. Interestingly, 55% of millennials are uncomfortable with autonomous vehicles. Another consumer poll taken in 2015, where the majority of respondents would never buy or lease a self-driving vehicle. The presenter of this information at the IPI conference is a leader in the parking industry, Carl Walker Parking Consultants. Their position is autonomous vehicles will be developed, but the driverless vehicle that is not personally owned, that is being predicted by some to decimate the parking industry, is decades away. The current reality is, despite Uber and Lyft and extensive promotion of AV vehicles and public transit, there is still much demand for new parking structures. So how does autonomous vehicles affect Summit's parking? Currently, there are too many barriers. There's government regulations. There's too many unanswered questions. AVs are too expensive and currently unpredictable. A new parking structure would last 50 to 100 years if properly maintained. New garage design considerations include future building adaptations, meaning in the future you would take some of the garage levels and maybe convert it to office space. These come at a very high cost. Summit currently needs 350 to 400 new parking spaces. Even with Summit's successful rideshare program, parking is still needed. Current redevelopment discussions should include additional parking. The bottom line is autonomous vehicles replacing the need for structured parking is extremely far off. I just wanted to also show you what a new concept out there is for garage planning to transform parts of a garage into office space if the use of mainly AV vehicles becomes a reality. There are inherent additional high costs and design inefficiencies of a garage of this type. There's lost parking for interior stairs and elevators, which are required to transform from a garage to office space. As we know, a garage, stair, and elevators are in your corners, so you maximize the number of spaces. Concrete floors must be designed for higher loads for non-parking usage. Added expansion joints and double rows of columns are needed as well. Express ramps are needed for any conversion. So while AV developers predict that in 50 years from now, 95% of the traffic will be autonomous vehicles, the likelihood is very doubtful. Therefore, we must plan for additional parking needs today because we will still have non-autonomous vehicles 50 years from now. The next section I'd like to talk about is transforming mobility. Software companies within the transportation and parking industry are working with vehicle manufacturers to bring parking availability into vehicles. Currently, many navigational systems within vehicles will inform the driver of parking locations, however, not parking availability. So the driver will drive there and the location is full. This particular software could guide residents and visitors to available parking through the vehicle's navigation system, as opposed to a driver, while driving, looking down at an app. With this software, we can utilize our current count systems in the DeForest lots that will actually bring in real-time parking availability to drivers through their navigational systems. This particular software integrates with Park Mobile and Amana McGann, which we currently use. With adding lot counters to Broad Street Garage and the Tier Garage by the end of this year, we can also guide residents and downtown employees to parking availability in these locations as well. There are future capabilities of this software down the road for parking availability on street. That's still being developed by this software company. It could also show you where your parking restrictions are, your loading zones, where your rideshare drop-off and pickup locations are, and EV charging stations. So therefore, while they're driving, they would have this information while they're driving and not looking at an app. So someone is currently looking and speaking to them. We had a meeting with the technology committee last evening with the vendor to try a pilot, utilizing the DeForest lots information and then bring on the additional garages. So again, these are the two main information that we saw at the IPI conference, and I'm sure you'll be hearing more in the coming months and in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Why don't we open up for questions? Marjorie?
Thank you for your presentation, Rita. I was just wondering, you mentioned using navigation systems for the mobility, and I'm just wondering, now that people are getting, Waze and all of those kinds of apps, how many people actually are still purchasing cars with navigation systems? And if we're seeing a decrease in that, is there a way to use it with apps? A lot of us put the apps on a handle on our dashboard. So it really is no different than a navigation system in the sense of driver distraction.
Well, I think with Waze, because we looked at that last evening, the app itself is a little slow for the on-street or off-street application side of it. Many people use Waze or Google, and you can have your phone and it'll tell you, turn right here, turn right there. They really don't have to look at it. But it's a very slow-moving app for parking availability. But a lot of the manufacturers are working with parking and transportation planners to include it in the navigation system. A lot of more vehicles are coming with navigation systems. You can pay extra for certain applications, but this is where it'll come in, like BMW will come in with Waze and come in with this particular software at no additional cost.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you know, you were talking about the robust services. Is there any way that, you know, I don't hear anything on the license plate recognition. Is there anything that we can utilize that in controlling the numbers or something? I guess we've invested a fair amount in there.
I mean, it's something that I can definitely ask them to see if they can take the ALPR information of vehicles there and then populate that into their software. It's definitely a question I can ask them. We were strictly trying to start with the off-street because we already have lock counters. But as an example, we discussed Union Place for parking on-street availability. There's so much turnover on Union Place, by the time it even uploaded, those spaces would have turned over or they're now full again. So again, I don't want to give a perception, especially for on-street parking availability, that a person goes there and then all of a sudden it's full. But it's still a question I'd be more than happy to ask.
Rita, you had said that you're trying a pilot. Can you describe what exactly are you trying in the pilot? What
Okay,
would you
so
like?
and again, it will be brought back to council. We're waiting to see how it would integrate. Currently now, we have lock counters in the DeForest lots. So every time a vehicle enters or exit, and then we have a lot full sign. But what happens currently is people drive there, the lot full sign, they go to the next lot, they go to the next lot. This would hopefully prevent that. So the data that we currently have would be brought into this app, and then the person driving there will say, okay, there's 25% availability in lot 1, lot 2 is full, lot 3, so they don't have to physically, they can go to lot 1 instead of going to lot 3. So again, it's all about of eliminating congestion. It's those constant trips of people driving around looking for parking spaces. That's the goal of the pilot.
I'm sorry, what is the app? Is it through Park Mobile or is it through some other?
No, it's
different
through
app?
INRIX, INRIX. And like I said, again, nothing's been decided. It's just, that's why I brought the technology committee on board first, to have an immediate discussion with them to get their feedback. So again, when we gather more information, I may be able to answer some of those questions for you.
Great, thank you. Beth?
In terms of the autonomous vehicles, I know you attended a lot of sessions about that. Were there any recommendations that came out of those as far as for municipalities planning for the future, looking at the redevelopment or any of those things that there's some factors that municipalities should be keeping in mind in terms of long-term planning and
Sure.
getting towards
There's
this?
two things. One, which Summit's already working on, or is involved in, is the rideshare component. Some of these autonomous vehicles, once they are deemed safe, there are companies out there where the city could then purchase 5 of them and have them parked in an off-site location, and then someone could then, from their phone, dispatch a vehicle, and that vehicle will come pick them up and drop them off and then go back. One of the things with autonomous vehicles, you have to realize you still need curb space, and then you need a place to store them. There's maintenance costs. I didn't want to get too involved in that, but there are programs that are coming out. But right now, again, there's a lot of more testing that needs to go on with these autonomous vehicles. Because again, whether it's Zipcar or some of the other program vehicles, that's the thing, it's the testing. But it is something for the future that we could try that might alleviate congestion. One of the things with the consumers that they also brought up is people like the convenience of having their own vehicle. They may not purchase 2 vehicles, especially with the rideshare capabilities of today. However, especially they can't bring their pet in an autonomous vehicle. There's certain restrictions. They're not going to take an autonomous vehicle on vacation. So I think from a family perspective, there might lower the purchasing of more than 1 vehicle, but we're still going to have personal vehicles on the road for people's convenience.
Mike?
No, I thought it's great Rita, to start thinking about. I think that app where you can find parking and stuff is a great thought around better utilizing our existing assets. So I think that's really, really important because right now, we have a fixed amount of them, and it's, it's trying to squeeze more vehicles in, so I think that's great. But I would kind of concur with Councilwoman Fox. Anything that's not going to be going through this is today's technology. I would just caution about wedding to a technology that's not mobile, that's not using the phone. I mean, that's just the way things are, and I think trying to force kind of against that tide is going to be very, very difficult, I think. But I could be wrong. I'm not a technologist. So I'm not sure, do they have plans for that? Because I'm the same way. I have a navigation system in a car. I haven't turned it on in 3 years.
Okay.
I use my phone. It's just easier and it's better. And I think that's kind of the way it needs to be.
Right. I think one of the things we're hearing from the parking industry too, and that's why they're pushing more towards the navigational system to make it, number one, less expensive, easier, is because while, even though you may have that phone right there, they're really trying not to be using their phones while driving. So again, I understand what you're saying. Most people may not want to use it or pay for a navigational system. I think through time, those costs will come down on the navigational systems. But I think the hands-free driving or not looking at a cell phone is a greater concern for the entire parking transportation industry. But again, I understand what you mean. I wouldn't want to get locked in. It's a pilot to see if it works. And, it's being vetted by the technology committee. And there's many questions that we're going to go back to them and ask.
Right, well,
So that's a good one.
No, look, I have a lot of questions about how people use phones, particularly my kids, but it's not going to change because I wish it to change. It is what it is. Yeah. I guess the other thing, which I'm just curious, when you read a lot of stuff about the future of autonomous vehicles, I mean, to me, this seems like a pretty pessimistic view around that industry. That's going to take 50 years to be completely adopted. I mean, I think part of this might be that you got to look at who's presenting to which audience.
Right.
I think if you went to a technology conference that was just talking about to angel investors, they'd be telling you that autonomous vehicles are going to be here in 5 years.
Right around the corner.
Exactly. So I think we have to be a little more open-minded to the potential for the technology. I completely agree with you. He cited a lot of hurdles, which particularly safety. For some reason, they seem to hold autonomous vehicles to a much higher standard than human drivers. But that's kind of the way it is for now. But I think it would behoove us to make sure we're fairly open-minded about the prospects of a disruptive technology.
And I think that also the reason for this different way to look at it is because there are a lot of people in communities like ourselves that need parking. So again, it's a mix, and it's something to continue to watch. However, whether the predictions that it's going to replace all personal vehicles, that's concerning. So we'll continue to monitor it.
Excuse me. Rita, thank you for your presentation. This doesn't have to do with that, but it has to do with Park Mobile, which we already do use. And an interesting thing I got today, which is, I don't know whether we want to think about it for Summit or it's even a possibility, but I got a message that I could reserve through Park Mobile my spot for the Yankee game if I wanted to. At first of all, I wasn't even thinking of going to the Yankee game.
Are you going to take me?
But the fact that I now can reserve a spot if I wanted to makes me think, well, maybe I want to go to the Yankee game. But that being said, what I'm asking really is that something, because that might be something very desirable, knowing, yeah, I could reserve a spot down in the DeForest lot, and I don't have to drive around, I don't have to worry, and I can go and reserve my spot. Something we could be looking into?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Through Park Mobile.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
That's very
Yeah.
interesting.
There's two, if you don't know that, and I'm late to the game, I know, with Park Mobile, but I really like it. And the opportunities that it offers, I think
I think
are
once
great.
we get into where we have some extra parking, everything is first come, first served now, but, for the future, it would be great if we could have reserved parking
Right.
and through that.
But roll it out, maybe a certain lot we could do that. Anyway.
Maybe some of the commuter lots even.
All right.
Everything's full.
Yeah.
This morning at 10
I
o'clock,
mean,
everything
maybe
was full.
maybe
Trust
there's
me.
a possibility of reserving, and rolling out some possibilities of reserving some spots and having.
Currently, until we get more additional parking, I wouldn't recommend that because, like I said, 10 o'clock this morning, everything was full, and I had residents and downtown employees asking me, where can I park? To where I had to put them in shopper parking lots.
Can I ask you, how are we doing with Lyft? How are, we expanded the Lyft program to have employees be able to use it. Are they actually doing it?
There's a very small window, about 3 or 4 people that are using it.
It's really small.
Yes. However, Summit residents are signing up every single day, and we now have a waiting list. We are at the 250 mark, and we still have a waiting list.
Okay.
So what I can do, I can send out a mini report to all of council, tomorrow on what the numbers are, if Michael is inclined. Because we did get all those, we have up until the end of August. I'm waiting for September numbers, but I can give you a full view of what's going on with the rideshare program.
Well, that's really great that so does that mean that if the residents are up to 250, does that mean really even if employees wanted to join, they really can't because we're kind of a max capacity? Or is that we allocated 250 for residents and yet there's still some X number still left for
Well, what we did is we looked at anyone who hasn't taken a ride in 90 days. We contacted those people. I think there was about 15, 20 of them. And if they weren't using the program, we asked them to kindly free up those spots for any additional person on the waiting list, whether it's a resident or employee. So we keep having Lyft give us that information monthly, so we can, someone's not on the waiting list too long, and then they lose their interest. So we are on top of that.
Yeah, let me just one, I think I'll agree with what Marjorie, Mike, with all of us, I think, are saying. I think one of the things that is people all use here, and I think people also use the technology that they're already familiar with. I mean, I use Google Maps, I use Park Mobile, I use the stuff that's already there. I'm not quite sure people will think of adding something new and different that's for a unique feature. So I think if we think about even working with software, we should be thinking about how this all integrates to the existing structures that people are using commonly, because that's where we're going to get the most bang for our buck.
Certainly.
Okay. With that, I'll just, Beth, you have, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
I didn't, that was just a side comment, not my actual comment. But I wanted to, first I want to thank you because this is a really important issue, and not just for our parking lots, but in thinking globally about our zoning and our planning, our master plan. This is a big issue, and the parking universe is really changing, and driving habits are changing. And those are things we need to take in consideration, not just in this perennial issue of parking and do we build a garage or do we not, but looking at the redevelopment, looking at our zoning, looking at the master plan overall, how should we be positioning the city to look at this? So thank you for keeping us abreast and keeping on top of this issue. And I also wanted to make the point that, the cars are changing as well, and not only autonomously, but the new cars are all integrating CarPlay, and it's kind of integrated, but it's kind of doing what you said, and what you said, the navigation systems and the phones are kind of becoming one. Your phone and is kind of plugging into your car and going on to, like integrating with your car and communicating with your car. And I think that's going to be the wave of the future as well, and that seems to be happening with all the new models. And I read an article about that instead of having these, navigation systems that are unique to each model, that they're kind of integrating with the phone systems and kind of making it all seamless.
Yes, and we discussed that
So I think we
at
need
the
to look at
technology
that as
committee last
well, and
night.
that technology that's going to be coming forward. But it's really important that we keep on top of this, and that we keep thinking in this forward way about what's not only what's in front of us today, but what's going to be in front of us tomorrow and next week, next year, and in the future. So I really appreciate you spending the time and putting together the presentation for us.
And also on that, while there may not be a lot of autonomous vehicles, there will be a lot more electric vehicles. So coming soon, we'll have discussions about EV charging stations here in Summit. So again, that's one of the things that they are seeing, that they are manufacturing a lot more electric vehicles. So,
That's great.
we definitely want to get on the map for that here in Summit.
Let's just see if there's any comments or questions from members of the public. Anyone? Great. With that, thank you, Rita.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation.
George is driving the car.
Okay. And with that, that's George Jetson
You know.
and his boy Elroy. Okay, so moving on to ordinances for hearing. Madam Clerk, would you please? Oh, I'm sorry. Public comments. Are there any members of the public here who would like to make a comment on something that's not on the agenda? No. Okay, now, moving on to ordinances for hearing. Madam Clerk, would you please read ordinance for hearing number 18-3174?
An ordinance amending the code, Chapter 7, Traffic, Section 7-14, loading zones.
Thank you. Steve?
Yep. This ordinance was introduced at our last council meeting on 9/17. This ordinance has been discussed with Public Safety, Summit Downtown, Inc., as well as Public Works. We have identified loading zones, locations, and times which will assist in moving all traffic, pedestrian, as well as vehicular in a more efficient and safe manner. There are 8 loading zones that have been identified. The zones available all day are on the east side of Beechwood, south of Springfield, towards Bank Street, on the north side of DeForest in 2 locations, west of Maple, towards Woodland, and east of Beechwood, towards Summit. On the north side of Springfield, west of Woodland, and on Summit Avenue on the north side of Union Place curb, on the Summit Avenue, and on the north side of Union Place, the north curb of the traffic island starting at Summit Avenue and extending along the curb, or the island. Islands or zones with some time restrictions are north side of Park Avenue, which will be 6 to 9 on Monday through Saturday, with a 15-minute maximum, in which a permit will be issued by the police. And then Summit Avenue has 2 locations that have time restrictions as well. On the east side of Summit Avenue, beginning at the end of the parking space number 33, towards DeForest, that'll be 8 to 6. It will be available, and while on the west side of DeForest, on the west side from DeForest, the time that'll be 9 to 2. Basically, once this ordinance is passed, Public Works will work with the police to properly identify these zones with signs and noting on the street, and then we will work with the community to get the deliveries parking in the proper zones. And just so everyone knows, this is targeting not only the big trucks, but the local delivery vehicles that are all around Summit. Like I said, this ordinance was introduced on 9/17. I move we hear this ordinance.
Second.
Great. Any comments from folks? Mike?
Just a quick question. I know that some of these zones exist and there's some modifications. We just had a parking presentation. Does this affect the number of spots in town?
No, these do not take up parking spots as I know it.
That's a good thing.
It is.
That's a good thing. That is a good thing.
And along with this ordinance, we're going to be adding signage, so this is very clearly marked, because I think one of the
Yes.
issues now that's it's sometimes unclear where those loading zones are located.
They're talking about painting it in the street and then putting signs up and educating, the customers as well as the delivery people.
I think the chief wants to say
Okay.
something. Come on. Chief.
Want to clarify things. So Aaron Traeger, the engineer, and myself met with SDI because obviously it's a problem on the crosswalks, and we understand that the trucks have to make deliveries. They've kind of worked it out, kind of themselves, like in front of Lyric Park is where the 18-wheelers kind of go. It's wide enough. So we just want to designate, and then we're going to work with SDI. They'll get a copy of all the maps because we want to educate them so the vendors, the businesses can tell their vendors, this is where you need to park. You may have to walk a little farther. We'll work with them, but then after a while, enforcement's, a ticket usually
Enforcement's
changes
enforcement.
behavior really quick. So, but we want to educate and work with everybody because we want downtown to be vibrant. So, but I think with where we locate them, it's throughout downtown. So.
Well, maybe I'll ask whichever one of you guys wants to answer. The only one that, when looking at the map, that I was thinking about a little bit more was the one on DeForest, right by the CVS, right next to the CVS, right? Because that's also where the exit for the DeForest lot is.
Mm-hmm.
And are we going to? How do people see? Like, will the traffic be jammed up if people are coming up and down DeForest? Will
So
there be
you're
enough
talking-
room? I think there's a. Right?
Like in front of CVS.
Yeah,
You're talking about the one in front of CVS?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was thinking across the street by the bank, because there's one parking spot there.
Is that going to be tight? Because
Well, I mean, you already have, if you're going The other way, like toward 1 DeForest, coming from, uh, um, Morris.
Like if you're
You already
trying to
have
go-
it, like you already have to creep out a little to the side of CVS because you can never see them come down the
No,
hill.
I'm talking about
So-
from the lot, from
From the
our
lot
mun- from
itself?
our municipal lot. If you're trying to make a left onto, going towards Kent Place
Right.
School, right? You're trying to make the left, and if you have a parked large commercial vehicle, like a 18-wheeler, right, in front of the CVS, then people are going to be already in the, it's going to be jammed
They're going to have to go kind of wide
Yeah,
to get around
yeah.
it. We'll monitor it, like anything. It's kind of a,
There's a signal there, though.
Yeah.
too.
yeah.
None of the
No, but
There's a
Not coming
signal
out of
right on the corner there, right?
Right, there is a signal at the corner, but when you're trying to come out, right, the cars coming towards, there's cars, as you're coming out of that lot.
When you're coming
Uh,
out of lot 1.
If you're
making
coming out of
left.
lot 1, there's cars coming on your left side towards you, and there's already parking spaces, so it makes, your sight line is already kind of constricted. You come out into the street in order to be able to see it. Then in order to make that left, and if you have a commercial vehicle already parked there, the people coming from the right side, the straight through traffic, everybody's going to be kind of very tight. That's all I'm saying. And I guess I ask you
we'll
to just
monitor.
monitor
We'll
it and
definitely
see.
monitor, everywhere.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a living kind of
Yeah.
breathing document as we
Yeah.
go. And
Yeah.
we may find some spaces work better. That one might have to be where they make it smaller, so it can only be a smaller
Right.
type, truck or low, not an 18-wheeler or what have you.
Right.
But we're just trying to control it a little better.
Understood. I think overall the concept completely makes sense because you should know exactly the locations where things are permissible and things are not. It gives more certainty to everyone, but I think we just monitor and see how it works, Chief.
And it eliminates the crosswalks. I mean, at the end of the day, we have so many delivery trucks that are
Yes.
parking across crosswalks. So.
And that's certainly a dangerous condition, and we don't want to encourage that. Mike, please.
Just one other question. So I've noticed along sort of the main those three main blocks on Springfield, is the thought that the alleyways will serve as loading areas for those businesses there? Because I noticed there's a lot of businesses obviously on Springfield, but there's no loading zones except that when you get all the way down to where the Joseph A. Banks building is down there. So just curious, like how are those businesses going to access their goods?
Oh, come on up.
For you, Council President, I just want to make sure I understood the question. So the buildings within the stretch that have rear alleyway access, they're going to continue to utilize the alleyways as a loading zone. However, that's still a public roadway. Typically, though, those businesses, their deliveries are done very early in the morning along the alleyways. We never had issues with tractor trailers or loading deliveries blocking traffic there. But the police department would enforce if somebody was to park there and not permit traffic to flow through there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Did that answer the question?
Yep.
But isn't that why we also made the alleyway a little bit wider with that sidewalk on that way so that it would have a little bit more width in the alleyway back there?
Yeah, and depending on the size of of course, the
Depending on the
unit that's delivering, if it's smaller, sure, they could probably get around, but we've never really had issues in the alleyways in the past.
Great. Anybody else? Okay. Any comments from members of the public? Hearing none. Any further discussion? Okay. I'll consider that hearing closed. Moving on, buildings and grounds. Madam Clerk, would you please read ordinance 18-3175?
An ordinance to declare air rights no longer needed for municipal use and to grant perpetual air rights easement at 300 Alley in the city of Summit, County of Union, in the state of New Jersey, and to release all public rights and interests therein resulting from any dedication thereof.
Marjorie.
Thank you, Council President. This ordinance was introduced at our last meeting. It declares air rights that are no longer needed for municipal use and grants a perpetual air rights easement at 300 Alley to SAF 367 Summit LLC, which is the owner of 40 Beechwood Road. This easement will allow the property owner to use the skywalk that's connecting the properties at 40 Beechwood Road and 367 Springfield Avenue over the 300 Alley. The 170 square foot skywalk will be used as a conference room. This skywalk has been in existence for over 50 years, but the use of the property has never been formalized. An appraisal was performed, and the easement was valued at $750. I move to open the hearing for discussion.
Second.
Great. Comments from members of council?
I just, these are these things where, things happen and you find that no one ever looked at this 50 years ago. I guess air rights weren't such a big deal, but as we've seen in communities like New York City, they can be a big deal. So I think this is a great, this is important to do because, the city should get something back for its asset. That's for the taxpayer. But at the same time, obviously, it's, we're not New York City. So I think $750 is a fair price. But it is, I think, great to see continued private investment in our downtown. It's repurposing a building. It's a fantastic zip code and makes me feel somewhat confident about our own redevelopment project that's going to go on West Summit. Clearly people want to invest money in Summit, so it's good to see, and I support this ordinance.
Thank you. Yeah, I support it as well. I agree. I think it's also good for everyone to have it, have these rights understood where they stand, so this way in the future there's no issues associated with it. We can all see that the building is being taken down to its bare minimum, and it looks like once that's done, we'll have an exciting brand new building placed there, which is great for the town. With that, I'll open it up for public comments. Marjorie, did you have
I was just going to add that that this agreement also ensures that there will be, it defines the responsibilities of the parties, and in terms of maintenance, repair, insurance requirements. So that also does protect us and the taxpayers. So the property owner will be undertaking a lot of that work.
That'd be great. Okay. Any comments from the public? I see Mark is back there. He's waited all this time. Thanks, Mark, for staying. I was just wondering if maybe you would want to come up and just tell us what the time frame is for the construction, since we're all witnessing it ourselves right now. So if you wouldn't mind.
Not at all. Thank you.
Sure.
My name's Mark Yeager. I am part of the development team that's undertaking the current demolition and reconstruction that you see going on at the 40 Beechwood building. Just in retrospect, needless to say, when we acquired the building and started to think about repurposing the 40 Beechwood building, we were very surprised during our title work to find that there, in fact, was no documentation about this connector. We assumed that it would have been something that would have been addressed given its existence for the last 50 years, some time ago, but the deeper we dug, the less we came up with. So this was not the path that we thought we'd end up spending as much time on it as we have, but we're thankful and appreciative that we've gotten to this point and able to move forward. So as you can see, the demolition of the building is begun. We're going to take it down to its concrete and steel and then start to put it back together. As part of the reconstruction, we're going to be adding about a similar amount of square footage that is currently on the second floor out over the existing parking. We're going to cantilever and extend out about another 4,000 square feet, the second floor of that building. So it will provide some underbuilding parking, or some covered parking, I should say. We are doing this in concert with a tenant that we've identified called Energy Capital Partners, who's going to be relocating from Short Hills. They'll be bringing about 35 young men and women professionals to the building. We anticipate that our work, the core and the shell and the base building work and the site work, will probably run through, at this point, probably late spring, at which point, in concert with Energy Capital, we'll be beginning their interior work as well, but then their interior work will go on for another few months beyond when we're finished with the base building. So we anticipate that by hopefully early summer next year, that the Energy Capital will be in the building. They're spending a lot of money and a lot of effort to house these young professionals that they're bringing. A lot of folks, as you can imagine, will be accessing the train. That's part of the drive and the desire to move from JFK Parkway to Beechwood. They're going to be doing a full self-contained internal fitness center for their employees and some club and lounge space, as well as doing a very, very nice roof terrace and a roof garden. So I think it'll be a very exciting project. It's obviously a very prominent location in town, so it'll be a vast improvement over what we've seen there for the past several years, and I'm sure the Energy Capital folks will become great corporate partners for the city of Summit.
Great, thanks, Mark, very much.
you,
That's
Mark.
great
Thank you.
news.
Thank you.
And we appreciate you
Thank
coming
you.
in for it.
And thank you again for all of your help.
Thank you.
Mark.
Okay. Any further comments from members of council? Okay, consider that hearing closed. Okay, moving on. Ordinances for final consideration. Madam Clerk, would you read 18-3174?
An ordinance amending the code, Chapter 7, Traffic, Section 714, Loading Zones.
Okay, Councilman Bowman.
Yes. As we previously discussed in tonight's meeting, I move that we have our final consideration on the loading ordinance covering our loading zones in downtown Summit.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Little?
Aye.
Mr. McTiernan?
Aye.
Ms. Ogden?
Aye.
President Naidoo?
Aye. Okay, moving on. Approved. Next. Buildings and grounds. Madam Clerk, would you please read 18-3175?
An ordinance to declare air rights no longer needed for municipal use and to grant perpetual air rights easement at 300 Alley in the City of Summit, County of Union, New Jersey, and to release all public rights and interests therein resulting from any dedication thereof.
Councilwoman Fox.
Thank you, Council President. We just had a hearing on the proposed ordinance. I would like to move this ordinance for passage.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Little?
Aye.
Mr. McTiernan?
Aye.
Ms. Ogden?
Aye.
President Naidoo?
Aye. Ordinance passes. Okay, moving on to resolutions. We have 4 resolutions from Finance and Personnel. Councilwoman Little, 5939 is the first one.
Thank you, Council President. The first resolution from Finance and Personnel is to authorize a 3-month contract extension for grant writing services, and that is for Millennium Strategies LLC for the amount of $10,500. We've had a contract with Millennium Strategies that is due to expire October 4th. During the term of the agreement with the city, Millennium has successfully helped the city departments write a number of grants. And they have agreed to extend their current contract for 3 months until January so that the city can put together a full RFP in anticipation of awarding a new agreement in January. So I would ask that this resolution be passed.
Second.
Okay, any comments from members of council?
Yeah, for people at home who want to look through, I mean, it's an impressive amount and number of grants that Millennium has helped us with, and they range from, $1,000 grants to $600 and $1 million grants. So they I mean, we've gotten all of them, but there's a lot of money out there in grants, and Millennium costs money for us to hire. But, it has paid dividends. I guess, this is probably more of a discussion for as we go through the RFQ period at the end of the year, but I would just hope as, when we get a grant writer in, part of the value of them is to uncover a lot of grants that we don't know about and to continually search for those. To me personally, like the real value of a grant writer is if at every year they continue to come up with new grants, because if they're just rewriting the ones that they've already done, city staff can do that and we can save the money. So I would hope when we have this discussion, we can talk about those metrics on what they're doing every year in and year out to really show value to the contract that they're doing. But I think so far this has been a great idea, a great use of city resources, because it's paid quite a few dividends.
I concur. I think in everything you just said, I think we will look, I would expect that we will look when we do out the RFQ to see what what folks are offering, other grant writers, and what they can bring to the table. But as far as what Millennium has done for us, we certainly know that we did get $400,000 this year, which is a significant chunk of change for use for downtown safety and improvements, that we could do that, which is, of course, key and critical issue. Anyone else? Marjorie, please.
I would just be curious to what extent the grants that have been identified here are grants that we are aware of and that Millennium may not have brought to us. You know, I'd want to know which ones we knew about and we apply for on a yearly basis, as opposed to what Millennium has brought in when we look at that, because the biggest grant here is a $400,000 grant, which is terrific. But I don't know if the NJDOT Safe Streets to Transit program is one that we routinely do, and that would make a big difference in our analysis.
Michael, would you like to talk about it just a little bit?
So the DOT grants have been routine. I know the city, prior to hiring Millennium Strategies, did apply for those grants. Those are pretty typical. At least the municipal aid one is one that the city's had great success. There are definitely ones that we had no idea. I mean, it really does require somebody doing this full-time to identify some of those. I'm interested in looking at the past 2 years and seeing ones new grants that they've come up with that we were completely unaware of. But the DOT ones are there. They're there every year. Some years it makes more sense to apply for certain ones, like the ones we did succeed on with the Safe Streets to Transit. Those are rare. They only offer those, I mean, they'll only award typically like 4 of those to 4 municipalities, so they're very difficult and competitive. They were certainly incredibly helpful in assisting the draft of that application. It's not something we've done in the past. The municipal aid is more common. You know, those are more capital project, road projects, and so forth. So. And then there's other ones that I know they've worked with a lot of the nonprofits and other organizations that are city organizations that a lot of time and effort went into finding grants for them. Some successful, some not. The amounts haven't been large. So, those are things that we have to consider when we're looking at it, and we'll go out and see what comes back as far as if there's any other interest. There's only a small group of consultants that do this statewide. So.
Beth?
This is an issue that we discussed in Finance and in General Services. And just in those, I can speak to those 2 committees at least, and that fall under General Services. We asked Rita McNanny, and she felt that the grant writer was enormously helpful. Many of us may be thinking of the council meeting, I think it was our last council meeting, where Judith Joseph said that she typically writes some of her grants herself because she has been doing that for so many years. But I think council should keep in mind that Judith is retiring at the end of this year, and Mark Ozrowski may not. I don't believe that he does have that expertise because Judith has taken that over, and that he will probably be counting on the services of the grant writer. So they are very busy, as we all know, in their day-to-day jobs, and these grants are essential for keeping, money flowing in and essential to our work in keeping taxes low and trying to keep the cost under control. So I think they expressed that they really value and use the services of the grant writers quite a bit.
Anyone else? Mary, please.
Last point, I just would encourage in January, when you go to discuss this grant and this contract again, maybe touching base with all the department heads to find out how useful, where you could see improvement, where you have found it not so helpful, and have just a pulse on, because you're the ones that we're trying to free up your schedules a bit so that you don't have to spend so much time doing this. But maybe having that conversation with all the department heads, which you probably do anyway, but where could they be more helpful, or having that kind of conversation?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the general consensus, if I'm getting it right, is probably that everybody thinks that, having grant writing services makes sense as long as the costs of it are justifiable because we're getting things for it that we otherwise would not be getting, because we all recognize that this is a way of deferring, avoiding having to raise taxes, because we are getting an alternative source of revenue, because since we're all paying money to the state, we should get something back for the city from all these grants. But I think everyone's making a very important point of really making sure we're getting our money's worth. Okay. Okay. Any comments from members of the public? Okay. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on. 5941. Beth.
Thank you, Council President. I believe I can bundle the next
That's
three
great,
resolutions.
yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, you can.
The next three resolutions are all authorizations for 2-year contract extensions. The first one is for hardware supplies being supplied by Summit Industrial Hardware and Dryers Lumber and Hardware. These are both vendors that the city has used in the past. The second is to authorize a 2-year contract extension for landscaping services from Adam Sheppy Landscaping. Again, that's a continuation of a current contract. And the third is to authorize a 2-year contract extension for on-call HVAC maintenance and repair services from TM Brennan Contractors, again, an ongoing vendor. So I would move all three resolutions for approval.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion by members of council? Any discussion by members of the public? Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Moving on, buildings and grounds. Councilwoman Fox.
Thank you, Council.
5971.
Thank you, Council President. This resolution authorizes the execution of an agreement with New Jersey Transit to permit installation of a bicycle storage facility. On December 19th, 2017, the Common Council adopted a resolution authorizing support for the installation of a 36 bicycle shelter/locker structure on New Jersey Transit property at the Summit train station. New Jersey Transit has provided the city with an agreement allowing the city to remove the existing 14 bicycle lockers on its property and to construct a new bicycle shelter and locker structure. And this one will have video surveillance, and it will be installed and operated by the New Jersey Bike Walk Coalition. And they also have facilities similar in Montclair, Bloomfield, and Elizabeth. And this structure is an excellent amenity for the community. And right now, we have about 50 residents commuting by bike per day to the train station. So this would give them a secure place to store their bikes. The annual fees for the use of the site over the 5-year agreement run from $300 in year 1 up to $332 in year 5. I enthusiastically move this resolution.
Thank you.
Second.
Great. Comments from members of council? Steve?
Yeah, I really look forward to this because, you know, we have so many bikes and getting them in one spot and getting them more secure for people, because we have had people getting a little loose with taking them. But I have a question. The people that use these lockers, are they going to have an annual fee or anything to that effect? Or how is that going to be?
Can you answer that one, Paul? I don't know.
Through you, Council President, yes, I believe so. There'll be a fee for them to store their bike in the... I don't have that. That would be something that the coalition will work out with the user.
So if folks remember back in, I guess it's 2016, so there
been
were
a while.
only 3 of us here that would remember it. But the folks from the coalition came in, gave us a presentation, showed us some graphics of what they were able to do in Montclair, I think, with very decorative, very nice bike locker that looks very nice, glass enclosed, it's very pretty. And then, of course, all this time is taken to us to the point of getting this agreement. But to your question, Steve, I think they're the ones that will be operating it. They'll figure out how the fees and the structure of how to charge. It would be a structure, I think, that will hold more bikes than what's currently in the shed. And I think one of the nice things, and there was a fair number of us that had gone to the public arts event the other night. I think this, again, is one of those things, along with the murals that we're doing, along with all the public art that's there, it will beautify, it will be a kind of a nice, the way that they showed it, hopefully that's what we'll end up with. you know, with the lighting and everything, a very nice, attractive thing right by our train station. And as we just heard from Mark Yeager, one of the key components of why people want Class A office space in our town is the proximity to the train station, brings people in, and I think this is part of that overall how it does our downtown feel. So I think this is a good thing. Any, Mike, please.
Yeah, no, I would just echo Council President Naidu's comments. You know, this has been a long time in coming, and it's a great idea, but as we saw with the bridge, dealing with New Jersey Transit, it can take a long time to get anything done. So happy that this is finally done. You know, the agreement in and of itself is an interesting agreement, but you know, they don't need to negotiate these things. But if you read the fine print, I think I'm happy to say our insurance carrier is okay with all the terms in it, because we are taking on some obligations around having this structure on the property. So that's a great thing. But it hopefully, you know, when we talk about parking, this is parcel of, you know, strategy, encouraging other alternative means to get to the train station. And I had biked to the train station a few times, and I used to lock my bike against the fence. When it rained, it would get wet, and I would get wet going home on it. So this is great, and I'm hoping that the management of this, it'll be a popular item and really continue, not just encourage current bikers to maybe use it, but encourage additional people to bike to the station.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Oh, Mary, did you?
Just a quick question. Do you have an installation date when it's going to possibly go in?
We don't, Councilwoman. Right now, the Bike Coalition is waiting to see if the council approved this agreement. Once this is approved, the governing body should be seeing another agreement coming forward between the city and the Bike Coalition that outlines the conditions and the terms of that agreement, where they'll maintain and manage that storage shelter. They'll give us at that time a good indication on how long it'll take to construct that. They'll do the construction of it, and hopefully sooner than later, so we can get this moving.
Hope so.
Great. Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any comments from members of the public? Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on. Buildings and Grounds number 2. Marjorie.
Thank you, Council President. This is to appoint a Shade Tree Advisory Committee member. Pursuant to closed session discussion, Council has recommended that Oliver Rodriguez be appointed as a builder-developer member of the Shade Tree Committee. I move this resolution.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion by members of council? Any comments, questions by members of the public? Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on. Works. 5920, Steve.
Resolution 5920 is to authorize the purchase of 4 salt spreaders from Sourcewell, formerly known as the National Joint Powers Association, for $137,880. Well, winter's coming, and we've had pretty wet summer, spring, and fall, so hopefully that doesn't mean that we're going to have a lot of snow, but we have to be prepared. Unfortunately, Summit Public Works does a fine job of maintaining our roads during the winter months, applying brine, salt, and plowing the snows. We are replacing 4 salt spreaders that are between 12 and 14 years old. They have served their time, and we are in need of these. Like I said, they will be, they are in need of replacement. The spreaders will have their own racks, so they'll be able to back the trucks in, and it'll be a pretty easy and quick transformation into it, so they can be out on the road. I move that, oh, by the way, these have been in the 2014, 15, 16, and 17 capital budgets, so I move we accept this resolution.
Second.
Great. Comments from members of council? Except for to Steve's Game of Thrones reference.
Very strong.
Paul, maybe you could answer. Is there any kind of secondary market for the ones that we already have? Can we get something for them?
So there is minimal value, though.
Yeah.
The shells are stainless steel, so they have value. It's actually the working components, the change, the drives, are the ones that actually deteriorate. So there's minimal value. So I think we'll see, we'll certainly auction them and try to get the best price we can.
Good, thank you. Marjorie?
I had a question that Councilmember Gould asked me this afternoon, and so I'm going to pass it on to you, Paul, because I didn't have an answer. He was
Sure.
wondering about some ecologically more friendly than salt options. Like, for example, he was talking about beet waste and pickle waste and all kinds of brine options that are not, are there other things that we're looking at that we could be doing?
We do. The beet option actually, beet juice is actually used out in the Midwest where it's fairly inexpensive to purchase it because that's where it's grown.
Okay.
And all it is an additive to the brine that we
okay.
apply. They add it to the brine. So we do look at any other options we can. There's nothing more effective right now than what we are using, which is salt. And we also add to our salt calcium chloride, which is on the saddle tanks of the trucks. So these spreaders actually will serve a dual purpose. They not only spread the salt material, but at the spinner, we're injecting it with calcium chloride, and that acts as a brine that breaks down the ice and helps in the de-icing of the road. So, but we do look at any option that is out there, and we research it, and hopefully, we're one of the first communities, actually. We're not the first, but one of the first in New Jersey to use actually salt brine.
Does the brine allow us to use less salt?
It does. So we typically treat with salt after we treat with the brine. The brine goes out prior to a storm. It gives us some time to respond, and it also allows for some of the breakdown, but it's not 100%. So, but it does buy us some time. Then we go out, we use, minimal salt if we can. And then depending on the nature of the storm, if we have to salt afterwards, we will. But we've also brined afterwards to save on salt and not to, and to minimize the salt intrusion into the environment. So we try to use brine more than salt, but unfortunately, we need the spreaders as well.
Right. Thank you. I'll let Councilmember Gould know that we talked about this. He can watch your answer on TV.
Yep. And he can reach out to me if he has any other questions.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions? Comments? Any questions or comments from members of the public? Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on. General Services.
Ah.
5960, Mary.
Thank you, Council President. Tonight's resolution is to declare a vacancy, which we need to do by law, for a senior registered environmental health specialist. As per closed session discussion, we are looking into further shared services with Westfield to fill this position at a later date. But at this time, I would like to move this resolution to declare this vacancy.
Second.
Okay. Any comments, questions from members of the council? Any questions or comments from members of the public? Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now moving on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Council President?
Yes.
I just wanted to vote no on safety number 2.
Safety number.
Just on the Beacon Unitarian Church. So I would like to pull that for that, only because
Okay.
that neighborhood has not been noticed by the church that this is happening.
Okay.
And, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have it, but it would be nice to tell your neighbors you're going to close their street down on Sunday.
Okay. So do we need to have a vote on that separately, Matt? or-
Yes, you have to, yep. So
Okay.
you can vote on the consent agenda except for item 2, and you have to vote on that separately.
Okay, fine. So can I first get a vote on the consent agenda excluding item number 2, 5949? All those in favor of the consent agenda as so amended?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now, going back to 5949, I guess we would need to have safety discuss it. So since Matt's not here, Steve, if you could
Yeah,
address it.
well, I can, basically, this has been going on for what, this is the 5th year that we've had?
They usually do, so.
I talked to 3 residents on that block today, and I think this might have been a makeup one or something like that. They got rained out, and they say they're normally very good at telling people, but no one knows about this. And that street, there's no really on-street, there's no off-street parking for the church, so they park in front of their houses every Sunday, and they live there, they get it, but I just think, it's a common courtesy to shut your street down. At least they should be aware of it. Just my opinion.
Remind us, when is this again?
Sunday.
This
Yes.
coming
This
Sunday?
Sunday.
Yeah.
Oh, so we don't have,
Yeah, we can't just pull it.
yeah.
Well, I mean, we can contact them and have them inform everybody of, in the block.
I can do that. Want me to?
I'd be okay with it voting yes, as long as,
As
on
we
the
can
condition
commit to
that
that.
they inform people about this.
So the way that this
Council
would work,
President,
yes,
if I may.
absolutely, absolutely.
We had a property use meeting with all departments, and I recall them stating that they would be contacting, if they hadn't already, contacted the neighbors, so maybe there was a miscommunication.
I think they said they had a rain date, but I'm not sure if that would be part of the first publication. I think they talked about having a rain date in case it was rained out. I'm not sure if that was part of the initial memo that went out.
Yeah.
It did come up in another property use.
So why don't we do it this way, if you wouldn't mind, Rosie, just contacting them to ask them to inform the residents as best as they can, of that fact that they're going to have it this Sunday. That would be great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I feel some door knocking coming down.
I've already been to that street. I'm not going down that street. Anybody else have anything? Are we good then? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Okay. With that, moving on to new business or council members' comments. Anybody has any comments or anything like that? Good. All right. Do you have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, so moved.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. We are adjourned. Have a good night.